So now we're getting on to the main speaker part of our event today, and we love having someone to come along and share their knowledge and their wisdom with us. And today we've got Baikie speaking to us. And when I spoke to Barbara on the phone last month, I felt like we could go in so many different directions because Barbara's got so many feathers in her cap. Here are some things some of Barbara's feathers in her cap. She's an executive coach, she's a career coach, she's a life coach. Barbara's an experienced group facilitator. She's worked in government across all levels for over 20 years. She's a published author. She's been a university lecturer at Charles Sturt University for 6 years. Barbara's currently completing her own PhD. Oh, and by the way, just offhandedly, Barbara is the current president of the National Council of Women Australia, which is just a little thing to sneak down the bottom of your CV, don't you think? So what I'm saying is we're so glad to have Barbara volunteer her time to come and speak to us today on the topic of grit. So please give a warm welcome to Barbara Baikie.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Okay, first of all, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and acknowledge their ongoing contribution to our great land. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and share a few things from my life. And, wrong way. Okay, this is me, this is my husband and my two sons. Ben is on that side and Joe is on this side, and that's my mum. And this was my second marriage 10 years ago in April. So when Stuart and I were talking about what I'd talk about today, we talked about a whole range of things, and the first thing we sort of agreed on was, okay, we'll talk about grit. So I looked up grit, and grit is a small or loose particle of sand or stone. You can have grit in your eye. Or it is courage and resolve and strength of character. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary, grit in the context of behaviour is defined as firmness of character or indomitable spirit. An individual's high in grit can maintain their determination and motivation over long periods of time, despite experiences of fear, failure and adversity. I think I've got grit, and I hope you'll agree with me by the end of it. To start off with, I was the third child in a farming family. I was the third daughter in a farming family, and you think, well, so what, big deal? Well, of course, in my era, girls were not considered to be part of the farming families, so to run the farm. So I was a great disappointment. So that was the first thing. So I think that day I was born a feminist. And the second thing was there were no boys in the family, so whatever job had to be done, you just had to do it. You just get on and do it. So my childhood was relatively, carefree, growing up in the farm, and I did get married and have babies. My career path at that stage was get married, have babies, live happily ever after. Well, I got 2 out of 3, so that ain't bad. And I have my 2 beautiful sons, Ben and Joe, and who I absolutely adore, and I have 7 grandchildren, but more about that later. After my sons were born and I was forced to leave work because I was pregnant, I went back to study, and thank you, Gough, I got my first degree and ended up working in juvenile justice. And with my best friend Margaret, we set up the Young Offender Support Scheme in Wagga, which was an alternative to custody. But then when I was 38, something happened and I couldn't walk or see properly, and I started with sort of difficulty with swallowing, and I had a bit of numbness around my mouth which sort of went up my forehead and over. And after a very hurried admission to Royal North Shore, they diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis. And they described to me multiple sclerosis like the electrical wires that sort of cross over, and the myelin sheets that protect the nerves are like the plastic on electrical wires. And that burns, so your brain may say a message, but it goes to a different part of your body. So I guess that right then, it took me some time to sort of work through that. Decided right then that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life worrying about whether or not I would end up in a wheelchair or worse. I would deal with that when it happened. So I guess that's an example of grit, but it wasn't to say that I wasn't terrified and I wasn't scared, because I was. And I want to just read a poem to you that I wrote at that time. So, this is called The Three Faces of Life. There are three faces to life: the living, the dead, and the sick. I was with the living, and now I'm with the sick. No one asked me if I wanted to be sick. I crossed that fateful line like a one-way valve. Can't go back, only thrust ungratefully forward. Lucky, I suppose, that I'm not dead. The living can do whatever they want. There is always tomorrow. Me, I'm confined to the fringes, an outcast, an untouchable. I can look but not participate. There's no luxury for me of tomorrow. Tomorrow is cloudy and unclear. So I guess that gives you a bit of an idea of how I was feeling. But the lesson from this is choice. And you always have a choice, not with the big things that happen to you, but you always have a choice about how you respond. And I changed jobs and I started working at the university as a result from that. So I just got on with my life. My marriage was failing and eventually I had the courage to leave, and it was very difficult, very painful, and a very lonely time. My sons were 16 and 18, and I don't think there's ever a good time to leave a marriage, but I did what I knew I needed to do, because I knew I needed to be me, not somebody else, what somebody else wanted me to be. So working at the university, I undertook my master's degree and then back into the world of juvenile justice as centre manager. And I was the first female manager ever. And there's a whole range of gritty stories around that. So learning the opportunity from that is take opportunities. I took the opportunity and the risk to go as centre manager, and I did. So I went on to further my career as head of the change unit in Department of Community Services in Sydney, then went to Hobart and back to Canberra in SES positions. And then one of life's curveballs hit me. My eldest son, Ben, my eldest son, Ben, the one on the closest to the kitchen, he had a son. He was married to my beautiful daughter-in-law, Katie. They had their first son, Fergus, and he was the first grandchild on both sides. And then Katie was pregnant again. And Hamish arrived 3 days before Christmas. And I was delighted that my son had two sons, because I had two sons. I knew how much joy that brought me, and I was really delighted for him. But that wasn't to be. I left Canberra to drive to Wagga and to be with them for Christmas. And on the way, I got a phone call from my son, Joe. And he said, Hamish has had a bit of a turn and they're trying to figure out what's the matter with him. Well, he collapsed and was airlifted to Sydney from Wagga. And we were lucky that it was in a plane that he was travelling in, because that meant Ben and Katie could go with him rather than a helicopter. So it was now midnight, so Christmas Day, and I thought, I'm not going to let my son and daughter-in-law go to Sydney and be in the hospital by themselves. I'm going to drive to Sydney. So after midnight, I decided to drive to Sydney. And you can imagine, been up since early morning. And I just thought, I'm not going to think about driving to Sydney. I'm just going to break it down. I'm going to drive to Gundagai, get to Gundagai, I think, okay, I'm going to drive to Yass, drive to Goulburn, and so on. So I got there. The paediatric specialist said to us, I'm just a plumber. It's just a plumbing job. We just cut the arteries, switch them around, and Bob's your uncle. And he said 95% success rate, that he'll be perfectly healthy for the rest of his life. 3% that he will have some trouble, and 2% he won't survive. We, of course, focused on the 98%. And we waited 2 weeks for the operation, then over the next 7 days, he had 10 open heart surgeries. So it was very difficult, and he arrested and they weren't able to save him. But he fought hard, and we fought hard to save him. So the night that he died, Ben, Katie, Fergus and I, we stayed in the motel close to the hospital, and no one slept, and it was just this very quiet night of people. And I want to read something. This is Hamish too, by the way. And I did this for his 10-year anniversary of his birth, and I actually kept a record every day. I wrote every day what happened, and then 10 years later I did this. So this is what I wrote at the time. Hey little buddy, you made it through 28 days. Hey little buddy, you were loved by all. Hey little buddy, you didn't grow tall. Hey little buddy, you were all right. Hamish Aubrey Howard, you were born such a beautiful boy into a wonderful family. Dad Ben, Mum Katie and big brother Fergus. In such a short time you told us and showed us what is important in life. Love of family and friends, courage to fight the good fight, hope and faith to live our lives and treasure every moment. No one can do it alone or by themselves. You did this for all of us. Love you now and always. So the lesson from that was that every moment and every day counts. So after that, I took a redundancy from the public service, started my own business and bought a property out of town, built a house and got married, which is there. So the lesson is, I was going to live happily ever after. The lesson is, life isn't like that. It's what happens to you while you're making other plans, and I'm sure you've heard that quoted before. You don't always get your choice, but again, you get the choice of how you react. So then Kilimanjaro came along, and my husband and I, Peter, we loved travelling, so we would go, one year we would have a nice holiday, like around Europe, being a tourist. The next one we would actually then go and do a trek. So we had walked in the Himalayas, in the Andes, and then we decided to do Kilimanjaro. So it started off with my friend Dolores and I, and Peter and another friend Brian. And we headed up the mountain. This was very early on the trek, and there was 4 of us. We had 14 porters and 2 guides. And that sounds very indulgent. We also had a portaloo, and that sounds exceptionally first world. But I can tell you, after seeing the tourist toilets, and even worse, the porta toilets, it was a luxury I was very thankful for. And there were 9 days on the mountain. We were walking up, and very limited water. Remember that everything had to be carried. And the higher you got, the less you wanted to eat and the less you wanted to sleep. So every day was a trial, and we got to the last camp, 4,600 metres, and altitude sickness kicks in about 2,500 metres, so we were well into that zone. And we had one more day of ascent, and I think I've got a couple of photos here. That's me on the way, feeling pretty good. That's Dolores and I on the way. And we got up very early in the morning, and I noticed my face was sort of feeling swollen and my hands were feeling a bit swollen. And I mentioned to the guide, and he said, "Oh, that's all right, we'll keep going." We didn't carry any mirrors, so I didn't know how swollen it was, but it felt swollen. And so we start off, and at altitude it's very difficult to walk, and I kept saying to myself, I am strong, I will make it to the top. I am strong, I will make it to the top. And kept going. And I've been talking about things about me being strong. I'm going to talk about some things not so strong now. We'd been walking for about 6.5 hours, and we stopped for lunch. And I'm there totally focused on eating my lunch, like open your mouth, food in, chew, swallow. And there's a conversation sort of going over there, something, they're talking about stuff. The conversation is, she's got altitude sickness, she needs to go down. So they came and told me, you've got to go down. And I'm saying, no, I'm going to the top. And they're saying, well, you can go for half an hour more, and then you've got to go down. I said, okay. So we kept going, and this is us up at Stella Point. And you can see my face is very swollen. I was pretty much out of it, and my husband said, I'll come down with you, and I'm going, okay, whatever. and not thinking for a second about the sacrifice that he was making, because he could have made it to the top. And we were about 120 metres from the top, and we're actually at the rim, and then you go down and then up to the summit. So then I went down, and they call it the Alpine Desert, and there's nothing there, just sort of these shady rocks, and you sort of skid down, and it was 6.5 hours up and 2.5 hours back down. And we just continued down, and I was just like totally exhausted. I said, I've just got to sit down. And he said, you can't. I said, I have to sit down. I cannot go any further. And he said, all right, you can sit down for a moment, but you've got to get up and keep going because you'll get cold and we can't carry you down. You have to walk down. So I did that, and Peter sort of helped me get up and made it down. And when I got to the tent, I just collapsed into the tent and laid flat. And Peter took off my boots. And then the thing that happens with altitude sickness is the only cure is go down and they give you diuretics. Now, with diuretics, you know what happens then? You need to pee. Now, the closest toilet, because the Portaloo had gone up to the top of the mountain, the closest toilet was 150 metres back up the mountain, and I just knew there was no way I could physically do it. Now, I'm a country girl, don't mind the squat, but outside were the porters, so I'm not going outside. And I felt so humiliated, this sense of failure that I hadn't made it to the top because I was so set that I was going to make it. And so my husband and I decided that I would pee in our bottle, and luckily it had a big wide neck. And just got to picture the scene, freezing cold, like you can see, it's really cold, 4 layers of clothes. Okay, I've got to take 4 layers of clothes off, squat, you get the picture, it wasn't pretty. And I was so humiliated, and I just said to my husband, you talk about this and you're dead. And now here am I talking about it. But it was such a learning thing because I was so vulnerable that night and had that huge sense of failure. And we all hate to be vulnerable, we all want to be strong. But at times, it's really good to be able to put your hand up and say, I need a hand. And that song, Stand By Me, I really love, because stand by me because I'm strong, but when I'm feeling a bit weary, you stand by me. So at times, we all need a bit of a hand. And being vulnerable really strengthened the relationship with Peter in a way that I don't think it could have done otherwise. We can laugh about it now, but it wasn't very much to laugh about it that night. And failure is how we perceive it. I thought I failed. Now, I had another friend who actually did climb Kilimanjaro. She got to exactly the same point as I did. And she was saying, oh, I climbed to the top of the mountain and I'm going, wow, you did it and I didn't. And then I talked to her and she went to the same place I did. She thought it was a success. I thought it was a failure because I didn't get there. However, writing the book, and I think the book might be the next one, writing the book with Dolores about the experience made me put it into context, that it was actually a success and not a failure. So, next thing is, life was good, good relationship, good family, good book, business going well, started my PhD, all going well. And I got I got the biggest curveball of all. We are a water skiing family and we barefooted, and I'm still the only female that I know that can barefoot, and I do attribute this to my childhood, that I thought the boys can do it, I can do it. So barefooting was something that we all did. However, this is my beautiful son Joe. He was barefooting and I had a phone call from my daughter-in-law to say that Joe had had an accident and that they were calling the ambulance. So then I phoned my other son to let him know, and I couldn't get onto him, so I phoned his wife, couldn't get onto her. So then I phoned wife's twin sister, because I knew they were all on holidays together, and they'd got the phone call saying Joe's dead. And Joe's dead. It was terrible, it was devastating, and nothing could have shocked me more in this world. My child, my baby, was dead. I felt so injured and so hurt that nothing could hurt me. I was completely injured. Peter drove me to Wagga, where his wife and 3 children, he had 3 small children, or has 3 small children. They were 7, 5 and 3. And everyone was devastated and bewildered. I didn't sleep or didn't eat very much for 3 days as we started arranging his funeral. Walking has always been one of my coping mechanisms, and including when necessary in the middle of the night. And one night I walked about 7 kilometres and just laid down on the ground in this park and just sort of said, why, where are you? You know, like, why? And then I just thought, stop it, just get up. You have a role to be a role model for your family. You need to be able to show your family that even though bad things happen, it'll be okay. And so that morning I started eating breakfast, I started writing his eulogy, and again being very vulnerable but surrounded by friends and loved ones. Then in lots of ways did practical things like bringing cooking so I didn't have to think about cooking. I went to counselling, got some strategies to support the family. I had massages. I learned some yoga moves, and I went on to be a Drew yoga teacher, and I used to do these things with the kids that help with grief, and so they became known as Granny's exercises, so we used to do those all the time. So live your life the way you want to be remembered, and Joe did this. He was larger than life, and although he only lived 34 years, we think he crammed about 64 years into them, and there were over 1,500 people at his funeral, and this is a testament to him. He died 4 years ago this Wednesday, and is the grief less intense? Yes, it is. Is it less now? No, it's not. It's not, and I'm kind of glad it's not. It's indicative for my love for him, and there'll always be a hole in my heart and something missing, and that's okay. I slowly returned to living, and there is a sadness within me that I think will never be completely dissipated. But something else happened. I have a drive to make every day count, to be the best I can, and do the most I can, and use the time while I'm here. It's not hiding from the pain, it's using the pain as a driver to be good. Lessons from this? There are many. Again, it's about choice. I could be bitter and twisted. I mean, it's a pretty mongrel thing to lose your beautiful son. Or I can be thankful that I had him for 34 years, and I'm thankful. About being vulnerable again, and yes, it was very vulnerable, but it's okay. And also death is part of our life, and it's to be respected and know that it's not very far away from any of us. And despite how we live our lives believing that it is far away from us, there's one thing I can guarantee you, you're all going to die. And we need to live every moment mindfully and to be here and now and not worry about the past, because we can't change the past. But think about the future, because you can shape the future how you want to be remembered. So, life hadn't finished throwing curveballs at me. On the 18th of November 2005, my best friend, my soul sister, my partner in my life adventures, was diagnosed with 30 brain tumours, and she lived until the 6th of August last year. And I say lived very deliberately, because she went to Vietnam with 30 brain tumours for a holiday with her daughter. She went snorkelling in the Great Barrier Reef, hot air ballooning, climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge with her son, and had countless adventures with me. You may have heard of Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom. Well, I had Thursdays with Mark, and every Thursday I used to go over and we would spend the day and night laughing and talking and doing things, and we actually helped to raise a lot of money for hospice. And you might think it's a terrible time knowing someone's going to die, but there was the most magic moments and the precious moments, because that's how we should live our life. Like, we all know we're going to die. It was just that she knew when, and we don't. But on the 6th of August, her time on earth was over. And again, I did the eulogy with her daughter and gave her a wonderful send-off. So I'm sure that curveballs will come to us all, and we have no control over those big ones. But when Mark got sick, I said to my husband, I don't want to regret anything. And, you know, when she said, I don't want to regret anything, and I don't, and I'm very thankful for that. And I think that's how we should think about life, that we shouldn't regret anything that we haven't done. We should do what we need to do. And now this is my beautiful Mark. And this is when she was ill, and we went out for dinner this night, and it was a really special night. It was fantastic. And then this one is this is last Christmas. Now this is me and my grandchildren and our exchange student Marta sitting on the lounge with me. Not all of these people are my blood grandchildren, but they all call me Granny, and it's fantastic. And then this one is us jumping for joy with, this is in Switzerland, with our other exchange student, Martina, in the middle, and Peter and I and her mum and her brother. And this is in Switzerland, and this is what we should be doing in life. Enjoying every moment and jumping for joy. And I guess, you know, I've shown you that life is full of ups and downs, or my life has been. But it is about every moment of every day, appreciating it, living very mindfully, and I just want you to do this. Come on, everybody. These are seconds of time. And I'm sure you had seconds of time yesterday and you'll have seconds of time tomorrow. But then they're gone. You can't get those seconds back. They're gone. So don't waste the time. Don't waste the seconds. Now I've brought in here I've been burning a peace candle, and there's some peace candles, perhaps not one for everybody, but you can create more peace candles. And there's a little story about it, that this is, you can carry on the peace with lighting a candle and sharing the candle. There's also a little sticker that you can pick up that talks about grit and the meaning of grit. So that's it. I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and it's all about living and making the most of it. So thank you.
Once more for Barbara Baikie, everyone. I really appreciate, I mean, we're all volunteers here, but to get someone to, you know, spend so much time preparing a talk to give to a community group that they've never met before is so great. And I'm also glad that at Sunday Assembly we have the forum to talk about things like the challenges that we go through in life. I mean, we had I think it was last year, we had a whole event on death featuring Dr. Philip Nishke. So if we are going to build this resilient community, we do need to talk about some of these challenges and thorny issues that we need to think about.